All right. Hi, everybody. So welcome to our LISSA meeting focusing on NJLA. We are joined today by Carina Gonzalez, the president of NJLA, and Brett Bonfield, the executive director. So I'm just going to ask you guys to introduce yourselves, what your current role is, and also let us know what book you're reading right now. If you
Hi, my name is Carina Gonzalez. I am currently a high school library media specialist at Governor Livingston High School in Berkeley Heights. And what were all the things you wanted to hear?
Yeah, just introduce yourself and if you want to share what book you're reading right now or a recent really good book
I'm
recommendation.
actually currently reading Taíno by Jose Barreiro, and it's a book about the history of the indigenous Caribbean peoples.
And I'm Brett Bonfield. I'm the executive director at New Jersey Library Association. I started there about a year ago. Relevant to this group, I was, prior to that, the deputy director at Cincinnati and Hamilton County Public Library for 4 years. Before that, I was the executive director at Princeton Public Library for 3 years. And before that, I was the director at the Collingswood Public Library in South Jersey for 8 years. I'm reading Something Wicked This Way Comes. My brother recommended it to me. And it's an amazing book. I highly recommend it.
Awesome. Thank you guys. So as you know, all of us here, we're just at the start of our library career. So I'd love to hear how both of you got into librarianship, what kind of made you think this is the path for me. If you can talk about your school experience and then kind of, your path to where you are now.
So I found this path by complaining in my kitchen to a friend of mine who was a public librarian, and I was an English major, but I swore that I would never teach. And I wanted a career. I'd kind of exhausted every possible avenue, hit every ceiling that I could with an English degree, and I wanted a career. So she said, "You should be a librarian." And I laughed at her because I am not shy and I'm allergic to cats. And while I do have cardigans, it's not like my thing. Um, and I was sort of fell for all those stereotypes too, that librarians are these evil gatekeeping people that protect the books from the, patrons and the children. And then obviously I started doing my research and was like, oh, this is kind of cool and high tech. And I liked, like most of my decisions were pragmatic. At the time, I was already married with a child. I already had 2 dogs that I needed to pay for, mortgage to pay for. So I wanted something that had a flexible degree so that even if whatever one I chose, school or public, I'd have other options to go to in case it didn't work. Because, a master's degree is an expensive commitment. Um, and I wanted something with growth potential because I love learning, and I knew that I would get bored doing the same thing over and over. So I wanted to keep growing, and I love helping people. I love technology, and computers love me. And yes, I am a reader, but that's not the big impetus behind the decision. I I was one of those kids that I was in AP everything. I was the annoying one that I was good at science and English and math and Spanish, and I just love to learn and I love to study. I was one of those kids. And I couldn't pick what I wanted to be. One week it was marine biologist, the next week it was opera singer. Then the week after that it was, car mechanic, and the week after that it was video game designer. It was all over the place. And that's sort of the beauty of working in a library is it never is the same. I get different questions every day, and it requires me to learn about those topics so I can provide the correct answer. So I'm just forever going down rabbit holes and learning about things I didn't know about before.
I like Karina's answer better than mine. Um, so I I went to Rutgers as an undergraduate. I was an English major as well. I only wanted to be a writer. That was the only thing that had interested me, throughout my life in terms of a way to make money. And I mean, first choice was novelist, but you didn't get into the MFA programs out of Rutgers, and they were smart not to admit me. I wasn't yet a capable enough writer. But I kind of got my second choice. I was hired at the University of Pennsylvania to be a ghostwriter in the development and alumni relations office, which meant that I was writing thank you letters for the president of the university to sign, along with speeches for other people to give and brochures and that sort of thing. So, I mean, it was essentially my job to take a blank screen and fill it with words. And for 5 years, that was the most amazing thing you could possibly have asked me to do. Plus, I was hired in 1994, and they gave me a Unix account, which I didn't even really know what it was, but I figured out how to put my poetry online on this weird brand new thing called the World Wide Web. And so in 1999, 5 years later, they hired me to be the first webmaster for alumni relations. And this was pre-Facebook. They needed an online alumni community so that the alumni could find each other. And so I had this writing background and this tech background. And by the time I kind of burned out on, providing services to rich people, I had kind of a wealth of marketable skills, right? I could write and I understood technology. And so I was in my mid-30s by this point, like Carina, had a mortgage and, cats to support. And so I went to all of my friends and asked them two questions. Do you like doing what you're doing? And would I like doing what you're doing? And maybe you've seen that study that came out a few years ago where they kind of map people's happiness throughout their lives, but mid-30s is the trough for happiness. I don't have kids, but Carina mentioned, like, she had two kids. Everybody had young kids. Nobody was making any money. Everybody still had school loans. So nobody was happy except my college roommate, who had gone to Rutgers a year after for library school a year after we graduated, met his wife there. They were the two people who had graduate assistantships. And they basically said, what took you so long? Like, this is perfect for you. All of the skills that you have are directly applicable. And by coincidence, it hadn't even occurred to me when I started this quest. My mother, who worked in public relations, happened to be working in public relations for a group that has since folded into LYSSA. It was called Palanet at the time. And so her board had some of the top librarians in the country, including Carla Hayden, who's now the Librarian of Congress. It just happened to be in the Palanet board. And so she said, I can introduce you to some people and they can help guide you toward the right library school. And so I decided to go to Drexel because I'd already gone to Rutgers and that was the only other one in the area. I wanted to go in person. And I found out that I could graduate in a year, which was really appealing because I needed to get a job so I could pay the mortgage. And I wanted to do business reference. My father is a marketing professor, and I always liked his colleagues. I liked his students, and nobody goes to library school with the goal of being a business reference librarian. If you want to go into business, you get an MBA and you make money. You don't go to library school. And so I figured there'd be very little competition, which was true. I got an internship at the Wharton School's library because nobody else applied for it. And, everybody who has this internship goes on and gets a business reference job. And so I graduated and was doing the interview track, and they'd fired the director of the public library in the town where I lived, Collingswood. And they really wanted somebody from the town. And I had 5 years of management experience from that weird, fundraising, and IT stuff. So I checked that box. They wanted somebody who could bring in money because they didn't have any money. They wanted somebody who knew technology because it was 2008 and they didn't have a website and every single computer in the building had viruses on it. And so, yeah, it was bad. And so, yeah, I checked every single box, just not the boxes they expected because I'd never worked in a public library at all and had never had a full-time job in a library. But, and yes, I will, this is where I, own up to my privilege. They could envision a 40-year-old white guy as the director of their library, even though I had no public library experience. That said, I think I was the only applicant who actually checked all their boxes. And so that was my path to my first job in libraries.
Thanks. I love hearing all the different stories of how people get into librarianship. I think it's one of the careers where it's everyone has such a different story. So what are some of the, pros and cons of the different kinds of librarianship? How did you decide on public librarianship? Did you ever consider other avenues?
So I've actually done many different kinds of librarianship. I started off, I guess, technically as a legal librarian when I was working for the New Jersey Education Association. And I did not realize this was a foreshadowing moment, that this meant that I was going to be, it was, just a job. And, as has been mentioned, pets and mortgages. So I wanted to make myself as marketable as possible. So I got the master's plus the 9 credits. I got every single certification, cross T, dotted I that I could, because this was also right in the middle of the recession. So I graduated from Rutgers in 2010. And I remember, because I have a color-coded spreadsheet, I applied to 144 positions. And I got offered an elementary school position, and I was told in no uncertain terms that I was their 3rd choice. The other 2 had backed out at the last minute. And I was offered this 3 days before the first day of school. So I wasn't selective. I was just like, I need to get my foot in the door, and whoever hires me first is fine. I really didn't like elementary. I think it was in part because I was the elementary school librarian for 2 different schools, and they had different collections, different libraries. The buildings were very different. The communities were actually different, even though it was the same town. And I was never there consecutively. So on Monday, I was in one school, Tuesday, I was in the next school, Wednesday, I was in the next school, and it kind of went back. So I left there, and then I was a high school librarian for 5 years. And I absolutely loved that place. It's one of my proudest achievements. I got to renovate that library. I got a big grant for that library. And then I got pregnant with twins. So I couldn't do the hour commute anymore. And so I started looking for something closer to home. And I landed a job as an academic librarian. I live in Branchburg, and Raritan Valley Community College is also in Branchburg. So I became the outreach librarian for their library. And I was there for 2 years. And then, I figured I want to give public libraries a try. So I did, and I went into public libraries for about 5 years in 2 different systems. One, a very, very large system with 15 branches, and the other one it was a smaller system with 2 branches. So I got to experience both of those. And after having sampled all of the offerings that are out there, I decided that high school librarianship is what I liked the best. And so I've actually only been in this position for 3 months. So I'm back into high school librarianship. Pros and cons. When you are the school librarian, you're the boss. That's good things and bad things. It means that policies, procedures, how everything is run, it's up to you. It also means that you're probably the only person in the building, maybe even the district, that knows what you do. So you have to be good with asking questions, finding your people outside of your job. So finding them online, getting involved in professional associations like the NJLA. The perk is no nights, no weekends, no summers. If you're a morning person, it's great. I mean, you're up at 5:45 to get to school on time, but your day is over at 2:45, which is really nice. The different grades are not the same. So there's sort of an indirect proportion. The higher you go in grades, the less you will be teaching on the regular. So if you're elementary librarian, you're teaching 6 classes a day, 5 days a week, lesson plans, curriculum, the whole bit. Middle school, a little less, high school, the least. It's more facility management at the high school level. Public library is great because there's a whole community. There's a whole building of people who get you and do what you do, and you get to specialize in something. So maybe you just do cataloging, or maybe you just do programming. If it's a very small library, that's not true. You might be wearing many different hats, but if it's a larger system, you get to do that one thing, and that's what you do. In the public library, you also get to interact with the public. For some people, that's good. For some people, they'd rather not. So that includes all ages, birth to 110. And it also means interacting with unhoused communities. It means every single person you can possibly think that can come into a public library. Again, that's not good or bad. That just depends on what your passions are and who you like to serve. When it comes to academic librarianship, if you like to research, like really get in to the nitty gritty, academic is the one that you might want to look at. The academia as a whole loves rules and tradition and structure, and because it's that whole college university mentality, and you'll be teaching on the regular. If you're lucky, you will be a tenure track professor. Not all places do that, but the good ones do. And uh you will teach regular classes, sometimes push-ins, sometimes you'll be visiting the classes directly, and you're pretty much exclusively dealing with adults. If it's a community college, you're pretty much only dealing with associate's degrees. Then there's your four-year colleges, then there are your universities who also have grad offerings. And most of the time you can do your own research and they will help support you in finding your own research. Most colleges and universities require either a second master's degree, which is in your topic of specialty. So you would be a biology librarian with a master's in information science and a master's in biology, or they require the PhD. At the community college level, they did not require that, but the master's had to be attained later, after you were in the position for a while. So those are the major pros and cons. I'm happy to answer any questions. I know that was a lot.
Yeah, I think Karina, having worked in all three, nailed it. I think that's one where, if anybody wants to circle back and ask questions, by all means, but I think I agree with everything she said, and I think she covered all the major points.
Yeah, that was really helpful. I thought several things that I didn't know. So thank you for giving that overview. So I guess, so this next question is kind of a two-parter, and anyone who wants to ask additional questions, feel free to put them in the chat. But so how was the transition going from library school into your first, library jobs? You kind of touched on that a little bit, but was there anything, that really surprised you or that you kind of felt you wish you had done or focused on while you were in library school?
For me, what I found, because I started elementary, for me, what I found the most difficult was understanding how to lay out the scope and sequence of lesson plans to line up with a curriculum. We had talked about it, I understood it theoretically, but I was sort of thrown into a situation where I was teaching 5 different grades, 6 periods a day, and nobody else in the building could help me. They gave me a mentor, but they didn't know what I mean, they showed me where the bathroom was and taught me how to, call out sick, but they couldn't really tell me how to be a librarian. So there were a lot of tears. There was a lot of frustration. Um, but I felt very, very prepared for collection development and how to teach. Like that part of it I felt like I was good, but I wish I had understood more lesson planning. Um, I feel like having been a school librarian adequately trained me for all the others. Because when you're the school librarian, you're the only one there and you do everything from, wiping down the shelves to policies and procedures to presenting in front of the board. It's all on you. So when I went into public librarianship, I already knew how to do everything. So it was actually very chill. I remember a lot of people in my colleagues would be, really stressed out about stuff. And I'd be like, it's all right. It's so cool. Like, you only have to focus on this one thing. You're good. Um, so yeah, that was the difficult point for me.
Yeah, so I mean, so I was transitioning from, I actually didn't mention that I had two other internships in addition to the one at the Wharton School. So I had three internships at academic libraries, part-time jobs, before I got, while I was getting hired to be the director at the Collingswood Public Library. So I had, again, very, very little understanding of how public libraries worked. But I was also, again, almost 40 years old. So I learned that it was okay to ask for help. And so I reached out to the directors of the other smaller libraries in the area and asked them to visit the library and tell me one thing that I should work on it and how to do it, one at a time. So, and then come back in a couple months and I would take them out to lunch or coffee or whatever and ask them more questions. But, and then, a couple months later, ask them if I'd done the thing that they'd said. So, and it was, I mean, some of the most basic stuff, you should move the computers upstairs and you should probably get the viruses off of them, that sort of thing. And they were great. I was fortunate that, again, small library, we had reciprocal borrowing arrangements with two other small libraries in the area. So I started with those directors and each of them had been, a library director for like 3 or 4 decades by that point. So they knew their stuff and they knew kind of where I needed to start. Another mentor, was the president-elect of NJLA. We'll circle back to that. But, again, she knew a lot about the profession and had been in the profession a long time. Another one would go on to be NJLA president 3, 4 years later. So, again, I just happened to be geographically close to a lot of people who were very willing to help me. And that was incredibly helpful to have that kind of built-in network of both the other libraries in the area and frankly, a lot of people who were leaders within New Jersey Library Association and had a really good sense of what the best libraries in the state were doing.
And actually, could I add something? Sort of a word of warning. Public libraries, academic libraries, and school libraries don't communicate with each other as much as we would like to think that they do. And they do not necessarily honor the experience that you've had in the other. So every single time I've had to transition, they did not accept all of my previous experience. So the high school recognized the elementary because they're like, that's the public school paradigm, but the college did not. When I went to public, they did not accept any of my 7 years of previous experience because that wasn't considered public, even though as a school librarian, you're basically a tiny director. It's very frustrating. And that's also including the job that I am in now, 3 months that I started 3 months ago. They did not accept all of my experience. So just know that.
That's good to know. Thank you. Yeah, I guess kind of adding on to that question as, we want to grow professionally and, move up in the library, possibly become a director of a library. What are, I think you both gave good advice on what we can do, but is there any other recommendations, on how to focus on professional development or, getting to that next step in library positions?
Join professional organizations. They are worth the money. And I'm not saying this just because I'm president of the New Jersey Library Association. If you're in school, join NJLA. If you're in academic, join ACRL. There is an organization out there for you, no matter what kind of information work you do. And the beauty of it is that once you get involved, you feel less alone. You learn the tips and tricks of the trade and the best practices. You have mentors, a smorgasbord of mentors to rely on. And eventually you kind of get to the point where the library world shrinks so much that it's hard for me to walk into a library in this state that I don't know somebody that works there, which makes applying to jobs and interviews almost fun because it's like you're visiting your friends in a way. And that happens from serving on committees and writing for newsletters. And like, I get it. Money is an issue. If you're lucky, your institution will pay for your membership or pay for you to be able to go to conferences. But if they don't, and if you can swing it, try it. A lot of them will allow you to get involved completely virtually. You would never have to drive anywhere. COVID kind of pushed us in that direction, and that's a benefit from that. But yeah, I wouldn't be where I am today if it wasn't all the support and the networking that all the professional organizations I'm involved with helped me.
Yeah, I would definitely say join every professional organization that even might be relevant to you when you're in library school, because they give you an enormous discount. I did. I mean, when I was, again, had a mortgage to pay, it was tough to do. And I joined ALA and a bunch of their different divisions and new members roundtable within ALA. And I joined SLA and I joined the ACRL Delaware Valley because, again, I thought I was going to do academic librarianship. And I did some weird, like, academic technology. I don't even remember what they're called. But yeah, I mean, again, like, it's like, I don't know, it was like $25. Why, see what happens, right? But don't just like pay your membership, actually volunteer, do stuff. Like, I was on SLA committees when I was in library school. I was the student liaison to the ACRL Delaware Valley Board when I was in library school. I published 2 articles in Library Journal, within the first few months, well, after one while I was in library school and one while I was still looking for a job. Because again, writing was the thing I knew how to do, right? I didn't know how to work in a library yet, but I could write. So, I mean, get involved. And this matters in part because it helps actually direct you toward the thing you like doing. Where are your people? Who do you enjoy being around? But it also helps you get a job. And I think that's the big thing that I really, really wish I'd spent more time on when I was in library school, was really, really understanding how to write a cover letter, how to write a resume, and even more important, how to interview. So now I've been on the other side of that, right? Again, you've heard my spiel, right? I was a library director at Collingswood and then in Princeton Public Library, and then, Cincinnati and Hamilton County. People don't know it here, but we had 800 employees. I had 650 people reporting up through me. I did interviews all the time. And if I hear one more person say that they want to be a librarian because they like reading books, I mean, just, you have to learn what's actually going to get you hired. And again, and what each of the pieces is for. And my very favorite question to ask people in an interview. So if you are ever interviewed by me, you will know this question is coming. How did you prepare for this interview? And the right answer is not, I practiced out loud while I was doing the dishes, not I said it out loud to my dog. The answer is I practiced with colleagues or I practiced with friends, because everything in libraries is a group project. Even if you're a school librarian, you have other colleagues that you're working with. You have to get along well with people. You have to be willing to pull people in to help you. And of course, be willing in turn to help other people. And so the right answer is I practiced with multiple friends or colleagues or whatever for this interview. And they gave me really difficult feedback, and it was really hard to hear. And they made me better prepared for this interview. That's the right answer. And I really wish I'd known that in library school, because I was a terrible, terrible interview. When I look back at the kind of answers I gave and how I prepared, I was doing my best, but I just didn't know how to do it. And so please find people who will be hard on you, and have them give you honest feedback on your interview techniques.
And finding people who do these things and joining these professional organizations also shows you what you really don't want to do. Sometimes it looks really good on paper, and then you talk to people, and don't ever think that because you're new, they don't want you to join and they're not going to consider your input valuable. They are hungry for your perspective. Information professionals know that this field changes every minute because of the terabytes of information that is created around the world constantly. They want to know what is the latest and greatest. What are the trends? What's being taught to our, new librarians as they're coming through. So you are going to be delighted about how enthusiastic they're going to be for you to join and have your voice be heard.
And the answers you can give should pull from your experience following the publications and your volunteer experience or going to conferences or whatever at NJLA or ALA or whatever. Again, that shows that you can synthesize information from multiple sources. And again, you haven't had a full-time job. You're applying for your first full-time job in libraries, right? Or your second or whatever. And so that gives you more to pull from when they ask you questions about things. You're not just talking about past experience that wasn't directly in libraries. You can talk about, well, this is what I see at ALA, or this is what I see at NJLA, or this is what I see at, NJZL or whatever. And this is how it applies to the question you've just asked me. Right.
So thank you for that. So let's look at NJLA. What is it? What does everyone there do? And how did you guys get involved and in your roles now?
So the New Jersey Library Association is an organization that serves all kinds of library workers, not just librarians, not just libraries. Okay, that's important, because whether you're a school librarian, whether you're custodial staff, your security officer, any kind of job that you have in a library or information institution, we serve you. And we provide networking experiences and professional development and mentoring and lots and lots of leadership opportunities. Like Brett was saying, that's one of the greatest things. I have gotten as far as I have, and I've still technically never been a supervisor, but I'm president. So you can totally get there, and I can say, well, I led this committee. I did this thing. I was a part of, writing this grant or whatever. And Brett, tell us some more of the things that NJLA does.
Okay. Yeah. So NJLA serves primarily public and academic libraries. We do have school librarians who are members. We have trustees who are members, but it's mostly workers in public and academic libraries. So if you join, those are most of the people you'll see. There are 3,500 members who work, again, primarily in public and academic libraries in New Jersey. The big thing we do each year is a conference. Last year, we had about 800 people attend the conference. So it's a great opportunity to network and meet people from all over the state. The conference has one day of kind of workshops at the beginning that you pay extra for, and then the other 2 days, all of the programs are included in the price of the conference, as well as kind of evening events and things. So again, a great opportunity to get to know people. We are divided primarily into committees and sections. So committees, the president-elect appoints you to the committee. And so you can't just join a committee because you want to. Committees are volunteers who essentially do the work of the association, because we only have 3 employees. So a lot of the work is done by people who volunteer their time. So things like publishing the newsletter. We have a quarterly newsletter, and that's published by volunteers for the newsletter committee. But then we also have sections. Sections are organized around either job types or interests. So people who might be interested in public relations have a section, or people who work in county libraries have a section. People who work in small libraries have a section. People who work in county libraries have a section. ACRL is a section, an Association of College Research Libraries, with New Jersey chapter is also the college and university section of NJLA. So anybody can join any section at any time for free. They are independently organized groups that operate under NJLA's umbrella. And so they have their own elections and their own bylaws each year for their leadership. So if you know ALA's structure, sections are like divisions, and committees are like committees. Again, in ALA, you get appointed to a committee, but you can join any division you want at any time. The only difference with NJLA is all of the divisions are free once you join. So you can be a member of 10 divisions or more if you want to. There are something like 30 divisions. You could join all of them if you really wanted to. It'd be a lot of work, or a lot of email anyway. I see most of it, so I can assure you of that. And again, that's one of the ways that they communicate is by email. A lot of times they also have monthly meetings or projects or their own gatherings, things like that. So that's how it's structured, and that's how many members are. The other piece to know about it is we are a standard nonprofit, a 501c3, tax deductible, all that. But that means we can spend 15% of our time doing lobbying work. And we do. We have a lobbying firm. We work to get legislation passed that supports libraries. So we're working on freedom to read and anti-censorship bill. I'm sure you've been following all of that, so I don't have to belabor that point. But we also try to get funding for libraries. And we're working on a variety of fronts to get better funding for libraries. We partnered with NJLA, the Association of School Librarians, to get the first K through 12 information literacy requirement through. If you've taken Joyce Valenza's class, I'm sure she's talked about that. And so again, NJLA was the kind of co-lead with NJLA on that legislation. So that's NJLA in a nutshell. We can always answer more questions about it, but that's the big stuff.
So how would you recommend, students first getting involved? Like, what are the first steps to take? Because I know, looking at all of the different committees and sections, like it can be a bit overwhelming. So kind of what are those first practical steps to take?
You can email me and I can talk to you about it, and I'm happy to help you narrow it down. But we do have a student membership. And like Brett said, sections are revolved around interests. So if you know for sure, I'm working with children's, well, we got a children's section, I'm working with teens. There's a section for everything. And if there is something you're interested in that we don't have a section for, you can create one. That's probably the easiest way to get in, because you can just show up at a meeting and be like, hi, this is me. I'm interested. Help me out. You could also attend executive board meetings and get a big sort of formal overview of how everything works. That's pretty much it. There's no formal, you have to proclaim yourself. It's just, it's like a library. The doors are open. You're welcome to come in.
Awesome. Okay. So tell us about kind of your roles in NJLA. How did you come onto the board, and what are some of your responsibilities on the board?
So I'm the president. The way that happened is because we have a committee for nominating people. And they approached me and they said, hey, we've seen all of the things that you have been doing in NJLA. We saw your committee work, your section work, and we think that you would be good at leading our organization. Would you be interested in running? Sure. And then I won. I don't think I entirely understood what that meant until I was in the position for a couple of months and really started to talk to past presidents. But it's a complicated position that I think can be diluted down to be a really good listener and really care. So people come to me and say, hey, I'm having this issue with my job. Hey, I want to go to get my master's in information science, but I can't afford it. What can I do? Hey, I need to get my practicum in, but I work a full-time job. How can I? Any question under the sun. You're like the ultimate reference librarian for the state, except it's not for random information requests. It's for the library workers themselves and how to help them out. You also, lots of speeches, lots of writing letters. You have to go to all these conferences. It's just awful. That's my favorite part. I get to meet the coolest people from all over the country, and it's just amazing. You learn so much at all these conferences. But yeah, that's what the president does, and it has shifted slightly because the fact that we have 3 full-time staff is very new. We had an executive director, but now we also have an associate director, and now we also have an office manager. So a lot of the things that the president was previously doing, they don't have to do it anymore because now we have staff to do that for us, which gives me more time to just, document and streamline and also run the executive board meetings. That's something else I have to do too.
So I'm going to expand on a couple of Carina's points. First is she mentioned it quickly, but she led a section. And so I'd say that's a really key part if you want to work your way up within NJLA, if that happens to be one of your goals with NJLA or any of the other professional associations, is, start at a slightly smaller level, because you'll enjoy it more. I mean, it's easier to learn, one section or one, division within ALA or whatever it is, than try to understand an entire organization. And she did exceptionally well at leading a section, and that was why they approached her to run for board and then to run for president, right? So I think that's the first thing. And so again, kind of sample the different sections, see which one speaks to you, and then, start leading, volunteer to lead. And usually people are looking for leaders to step up. And so again, if you were really passionate about it and bring something to it, the odds are that your skills will be recognized. The second thing that I think helped Carina really accelerate quickly and be a really good president is intellectual humility. Obviously a very, very bright person. I don't have to butter her up, but if she doesn't know something, she will ask you. And again, I think so many people will just sort of nod and go, and they're afraid of looking bad or afraid of whatever. And she has the confidence to say, I don't know what you're talking about. I need you to tell me what you're talking about. And it's really, really good leadership, because she never seems to leave a conversation not knowing what's happened, what she needs other people to do. We all have our tasks, to follow up on once Karina's been part of the conversation, because we all understand it better, right? Because she, again, has that confidence and that intellectual humility to ask those questions that sometimes some of us are not comfortable asking. I'd say the last piece that I think is really important to address, especially when you're talking to aspiring library workers, is the whole like introvert thing, right? I'm an introvert. Can I really be a leader? I was having lunch a few years ago with one of my mentors and mentioned casually that, I'm an introvert. And he said, stop making excuses for yourself. And I said, look, I'm not. I actually think of it sort of as one of my superpowers, right? I'm not shy. What I like is one-on-one conversations. I like learning about people. I like interacting with them. And after I do that for a few hours, I need to be alone for a little while. But then I'm looking forward. I love conferences every bit as much as Carina does. But again, I tend to structure them so that it's a lot of one-on-one conversations, right? Lunches, coffees, drinks, whatever, dinners. I line up my meals well in advance usually, with people I want to see, or a lot of times people I haven't met yet, right? But people whose work I admire and I want to meet. Do you have time for coffee? Most people will say yes. So again, just because you're an introvert does not mean that you shouldn't think of yourself as a potential leader. Especially within our field, I don't know of anybody that's really been held back by being an introvert. You just have to be willing to be a little bit uncomfortable initially to volunteer to say yes to something or put yourself out there. And then you usually can kind of pick up and do really well.
Thanks so much. Yeah, that's really great to hear. So Brett, you talked a little bit about, the conferences that NJLA puts on. But so what can we expect for this year's conference? Can you share, information on that, how we can sign up and what to look forward to?
Yeah, I mean, I would say go to the njla.org website, njla.org. You will see conference right there. Carina set the theme for the year, and the president gets to pick the keynote, so she should be able to pitch her own keynote speakers. But do look at the program. It's out there already for you to look at, and think about what you want to learn and what topics you want to learn about. But also, even more important, look at who the actual speakers are. I mean, I'm sure at this point you've picked up on the fact that it's not about the course topic, it's the teacher that makes the course. It's the exact same at a program, at a conference. And so, if you want to work with teens, like find the teen librarians who are doing super cool stuff and go to their programs, right? And then go talk to them afterwards. The thing that they want more than anything in the world is for you to talk to them after their program is over. Don't be shy. Like that is the wrong time to be shy. They are on such an adrenaline high, and they just want you to go and tell them they did a great job and ask them a follow-up question or two, right? I mean, and it's like the greatest gift you can give to a speaker. Don't like slink out of the room, do the opposite, go and talk to them afterward. So, look at the speakers, learn about them in advance if you can, like that's really the homework. And then the other thing to do is almost the opposite. Always have a backup, right? Again, we do our very best to make sure that there's truth in advertising on the program. But sometimes, there's just a miscommunication, and you go into a program thinking it's going to be about one thing and it's actually about something else, and you're not really that interested in it. Have that backup ready to go so that where to go if for some reason, like 5 minutes in, you're like, oh, this isn't what I thought it was going to be, and have that other one ready to go. Nobody's offended by it. It happens all the time. Do not feel like you need to sit through a program that's not meeting your needs. So I'd say those are the two pieces that I wish I'd known before I went to my first few conferences.
So as far as the speakers are concerned, we have Anise Vance, who just wrote his first book, and it has to do with police violence. And then we also have Dr. Ronnie Gladden, and they are a very established author and speaker. Their book is called White Girl Within, and it talks about not only finding the feminine inside of yourself, but also the opposite gender inside of yourself. So neither of these are people that are in the library world at all, besides the fact that they're both authors. But I heard both of them speak at conferences, and I was just very impressed with they had topics that were so different from what I've heard a lot, and I wanted to share that. As far as beyond that, like Brett said, workshops in the beginning, then the next couple of days are scheduled sessions throughout the day. And on Wednesday night, we have a party. And the theme of the party gets set by the president, and I'm a gamer, so we're gaming. So we're having a board game night, and we're going to have tabletop role-playing games and trivia games and every kind of game you can think of. So every conference it has a personal touch depending on who is the person who is the president for that year. And my theme is breaking barriers, inclusive collaboration.
That sounds so much fun and like such great, speakers. And yeah, I love the thoughtfulness and the personal touch that you put into it. So I'm gonna open it up, see if anybody has any additional questions. Feel free to just unmute or put it in the chat.
Well, I'm giving everyone just an opportunity to think of their questions and throw things in the chat. Something I think you both talked about a lot is your mentor or multiple mentors. And I used to work for a mentoring organization, but I always just like to ask people how they went about finding their mentor and approaching them to sort of form that relationship.
Most of my mentors were accidental. They were the people that I bumped into that said, hey, you want to come with me? Hey, there's a meeting. You want to come? They were the people that sort of opened their doors. There's an organization called Library Link NJ that does have a formal mentoring program. And you can go there and you can search by years of experience and what kind of library they have been in. And every single person who is in that database, they are literally there because they want you to contact them. You do not have to be shy about contacting them. They get so excited when you contact them. So don't hesitate and find those people. For me, actually, because I'm a little older, Dr. Joyce Valenza was still a school librarian when I was a school librarian. And she was just sort of, her star was just kind of taking off. So I got to sort of be not parallel. Can anybody be parallel to Dr. Joyce Valenza? But, sort of slightly behind her following her from, conference to conference and seeing her present at places. And she was just such an inspiration to how it could be done. But I don't have a mentor anymore. I have mentors. I have so many different ones, and it depends on the topic. If you say like, oh, well, if it's marketing, who's your mentor? Okay, I've got somebody for that. Okay. EDI. Okay, I've got a mentor for that. Okay, school, and you sort of collect them like precious moments, and it's a lovely thing to have.
Yeah, I mean, I would say the same thing. I mean, to me, it's been mentors, plural, right from the beginning. And it takes work. I mean, you have to really, keep them informed and check in with them and again ask them if they'll have coffee with you and understand that you're probably going to be putting in more of that kind of initial effort. They're not necessarily going to reach out to you. Some will, some are amazing about that, but most don't, and that's fine. But also know that it's very clear that you're not bothering them. I mean, they appreciate it. But I would say the other piece of it is I've also been very, very fortunate to have extraordinary peer mentors. One of the things I didn't mention was as I was graduating from library school and looking for a job. The other thing I did was help found a journal in the library with a lead pipe. And so the other 5 founders became peer mentors. And then as they rolled off and other people rolled onto the editorial board and I stayed on for about 8 years, they became peer mentors as well. And then when I got hired at Princeton Public Library, a friend got a director job right around the same time, and he reached out to me, and then we expanded it by one and then by another, and that group's been going now for again 7 or 8 years, and there are probably 7 or 8 of us, and so we get together monthly to check in with each other, and again, not everybody makes every meeting, and that's also fine. I mean, again, don't be hurt if people don't seem to be putting in quite as much effort as you are. Again, in some cases, other people are putting in more work than I am, and in other cases, I'm putting in more work. But again, having people who are both senior to you as well as people who are peers as mentors it's just, I don't know how I would have survived in the profession without it. And again, you've picked the right profession if you like other people and like people who will take care of you if you let them.
And don't forget about social media. Every single platform, if you're on social media, has its library group. I'm part of the Fellowship of High School Librarians on Facebook. Great place to find people too.
Well, I want to be mindful of everyone's time. Thank you so much, Brett and Carina. This was incredibly helpful. I don't know if you guys have any final thoughts, something that you wanted to say and haven't had a chance to. If not,
I'll give you just one more thing that I think gets overlooked way too often. Doing library work is really hard, right? I mean, it's satisfying and it's the best job I've ever had working in the libraries where I've worked, but it's also really hard. And the people who stick with it and enjoy it the most, I think, are the people who also find something else that feeds them emotionally and intellectually and physically if they have the ability. To kind of balance out the emotional labor that goes into working in libraries. I mean, Carina can talk about what she does, but I mean, I run and I lift weights and I write and I ran and I lifted weights right before this. I mean, because that's when I could squeeze some time in, and I happen to enjoy that. Like I picked things that I like. Like I don't think they're inherently virtuous. They're what I like doing. But I think it's easy for that kind of stuff to fall by the wayside. You're in school and you're stressed out and you're probably working part-time and you want to find a job, and it's really easy to skip those things that feed you and help you balance things out. And I would say, if you can figure out what that thing is and nurture that too, you're going to last a lot longer in the profession and be a lot happier in it.
And I'll just reiterate, please come find me and talk to me. I'm virtually everywhere. Librariancarina.com. You can Google me. I'm not kidding. I'm a great pen pal. If you just want to complain, you have questions, you want to, meet for coffee or for a Zoom meeting, I'm more than happy to do it. You want to shadow me. I've done it many, many times, and it brings me joy every single time because I know that it means that somebody is not going through a difficult time that I did. I'm helping them cut a corner somewhere and, providing information. It's just what we do.
Thank you so much. And we're so grateful for your time and your knowledge and your enthusiasm. We really appreciate it. And hopefully, yeah, we'll all get involved with NJLA and see you at a conference soon. So thank you so much, everyone.
Thanks for having us.
Yay, see you at conference.
Good night.